Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Advent of Divine Justice. Dear friends, this is exploring the Advent of Divine Justice. We are on Part 4. Part 4. We're covering paragraphs 10 through 11. And in this section, dear friends, we will talk about signs of convulsion, extinguishing the lights of liberty, the steady rise of discord, fanaticism, and irreligion, and also how great is the cause. So let us read paragraphs 10 through 11. A world torn with conflicting passions and perilously disintegrating from within finds itself confronted at so crucial an epoch in its history by the rising of fortunes of an infant faith, a faith that at times seems to be drawn into its controversies, entangled by its conflicts, eclipsed by its gathering shadows, and overpowered by the mounting tide of its passions. In its very heart, within its cradle, at the seat of its first and venerable temple, in one of its hitherto flourishing and potentially powerful centers, the as yet unemancipated faith of Baha'u'llah seems indeed to have retreated before the onrushing forces of violence and disorder, to which humanity is steadily falling a victim. The strongholds of such a faith, one by one and day after day, are to outward seeming being successively isolated, assaulted, and captured. As the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder every day, as the fires of fanaticism flame with increasing fierceness in the breasts of men, as the chill of irreligion creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind, the limbs and organs that constitute the body of the faith of Baha'u'llah appear in varying measure to have become afflicted with the crippling influences that now hold in their grip the whole of the civilized world. How clearly and strikingly the following words of Abdul Baha are being demonstrated at this hour. The darkness of our West is, in this most great cycle, battling with the light of divine guidance. Its swords and its spears are very sharp and pointed, its army keenly bloodthirsty. This day, he in another passage has written, the powers of all the leaders of religion are directed towards the dispersion of the congregation of the All-Merciful and the shattering of the divine edifice. The hosts of the world, whether material, cultural, or political, are from every side launching their assault, for the cause is great, very great. Its greatness is in this day clear and manifest to men's eyes. So let us have an introduction to these paragraphs, dear friends. The beloved guardian indicates that the crises faced by the Baha'i community at that juncture of history was foreseen by His Holiness Abdul Baha. Shaykh Effendi asserts that the reason for the assault of the religious leaders as well as material, cultural, or political forces on the Baha'i community was the greatness of the cause, which is clear and manifest. The beloved guardian further articulates the nature of the encounter between the infant faith of Baha'u'llah and a world that is disintegrating from within. He identifies 4 signs of convulsion afflicting humanity. First, quenching of lights of liberty, increasing clamor of discord, growing fanaticism, and relentless rise of irreligion. In paragraph 10, dear friends, the beloved guardian Shaykh Effendi further expands the nature of the encounter between the infant faith of Baha'u'llah and a world that is disintegrating from within. So here is a picture of an apple disintegrating from within, and you can see the map of the world on it. And it's a nice picture, dear friends. The decade of the 1930s was marked by an economic collapse known as the Great Depression. And here, dear friends, you can see pictures from that period in time known as the Great Depression. There's a picture of this young boy on the left. He says, "Why can't you give my dad a job?" During the 1920s and the 1930s, humanity experienced unprecedented oppression and tyranny in different parts of the world. Another major point from these paragraphs, the political systems that were designed to be democratic in this period led to fascism, Nazism, royal dictatorships, and other forms of authoritarian dictatorships. A review of the world history during the 1930s reveals many revolts, uprisings, and wars in different parts of the world, including South America, Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Far East, leading eventually to the World War II. The early 20th century proved a period of continuous rise of irreligion, driven by the atheist theories of Darwin and various ideologies and political movements inspired and driven communism and Marxism. And here we see, dear friends, this is a picture of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. And on the right, you see Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' Communist Manifesto. In paragraph 11, dear friends, the beloved guardian states that the crises faced by the Baha'i community at that juncture of history was foreseen by His Holiness Abdul Baha. His Holiness Abdul Baha asserts that the evident greatness of the Baha'i cause has provoked the attacks on the Baha'i community, not only by religious leaders, but also by the proponents of current material, cultural, or political views. So let's get into it. Signs of convulsion. In paragraph 10, the beloved guardian further expands on the nature of the encounter between the emerging and resilient faith of Baha'u'llah and a world whose societal structures are crumbling. The guardian also describes the difficulty the Baha'i community has in resisting the negative forces generated by the failure of the old world order. The beloved guardian refers to the effect on the Baha'i cause of the world's degeneration, an effect that becomes more and more evident as the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder every day, as the fires of fanaticism flame with increasing fierceness in the breasts of men, and as the chill of irreligion creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind. Here we see a picture of the Statue of Liberty in darkness. The lights of liberty flicker and go out. The Baha'i community has been drawn into the controversies of the old world order, entrapped in its conflicts, overshadowed by the darkness surrounding it, and overcome by its increasing passion. And here's a picture of a bird entrapped in thorns. Catastrophe, dear friends. The catastrophic phenomena Shohreh Effendi is describing in this paragraph were driven by a succession of events and processes that started, strengthened, or culminated after World War I during the 1920s and 1930s. In particular, the decade of 1930s, the 1930s, was marked by an economic collapse known as the Great Depression that followed the Wall Street crash of late October 1929. The crash led to widespread unemployment and worldwide poverty. Here you see some headlines. This is the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Wall Street in panic as stocks crash. And a picture of this child says, "Please give my dad a job." Political aftermath. There were also major political aftermaths, such as the emergence of authoritarian regimes in a number of countries in Europe and South America, the invasion of weak countries such as Ethiopia, China, and Poland by imperialist world powers, and the breakout of World War II just before the end of the decade. And in the first headline, you can see, it says the Cold Water Daily Reporter, and it says war. 2 towns in Ethiopia are bombed. Italian planes spread death in sudden attack. So this is what was mentioned, Ethiopia. And then in the bottom says Japanese invasion of China. You can see Japanese soldiers about to execute 2 Chinese civilians. Dousing the lights of liberty. During the 1920s and the 1930s, humanity experienced unprecedented oppression and tyranny in different parts of the world. People lost their freedom and liberty as the result of authoritarian regimes that emerged in many countries simultaneously. So interestingly, I looked up the definitions of freedom and liberty because the beloved guardian uses them. And freedom states, freedom usually means to free from something, and liberty usually means to be free to do something. So one is free from something, and the liberty is free to do something. So their freedom was snuffed out like a candle. You can see how the hand is just controlling the populace. Forces of darkness. We have but to turn our eyes to the world without to realize the fierceness and the magnitude of the forces of darkness that are struggling with the dawning light of the Abha revelation. Nations, though exhausted and disillusioned, have seemingly begun to cherish anew the spirit of revenge, of domination and strife. Peoples convulsed by economic upheavals are slowly drifting into 2 great opposing camps with all their menace of social chaos, class hatreds, and worldwide ruin. Races alienated more than ever before are filled with mistrust, humiliation, and fear, and seem to prepare themselves for a fresh and fateful encounter. Creeds and religions, caught in this whirlpool of conflict and passion, appear to gaze with impotence and despair at this spectacle of unceasing turmoil. And here's a picture of the forces of darkness tearing the whole world apart. It was generally believed, dear friends, that after the bloody events of World War I, humanity was determined to build a peaceful world. And the formation of the League of Nations was a strong indication of such a hope. Such expectations started to develop even during World War I. Woodrow Wilson, the 19th President of the United States, asked the Congress to enter World War I by stating, "The world must be made safe for democracy." World War I was also seen as a war to end all wars. History has shown that those assumptions were false, and the political systems that were designed to be democratic in the 1920s and in the 1930s led to fascism, Nazism, royal dictatorships, and other forms of autocracy. And here we see Treaty of Versailles, peace at last. World War I was formally ended when the peace treaty known as Treaty of Versailles was signed by the Allies on the 28th of June 1919 without the participation of Germany. The Allies included Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and the United States, who fought against the Central Powers that consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. There were many provisions in the treaty, but the most important and controversial of them deemed Germany as the aggressor in the war and required Germany to accept the responsibility of having caused all the losses and damages incurred during the war. The treaty compelled reparations, and this treaty was put together by the Allies to prevent another war. However, its controversial articles and treatment of Germany fueled the emergence of another world war. You can see here pictures of the signing of the Versailles Treaty, and it says, "Treaty signed, war over." So what happened? German Workers' Party. In the same year, the German Workers' Party was founded with the agenda to abandon the Treaty of Versailles and promote German nationalism. Later, the party changed its name to the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler, an army veteran, was unhappy with the defeat of Germany in World War I, so he joined the party in 1921. Through his charismatic speeches, Hitler soon became a prominent figure in the movement. He blamed Jews and Marxists for Germany's problems and promoted the idea that Germans were pure descendants of the ancient Aryan race, which they considered to be a superior or master race. Hitler's views attracted much attention, and he became the leader of the party in July 1921. And here you see, this is the insignia of the German Workers' Party. And this is Adolf Hitler's DAP card with the membership number. Here's a picture of German Workers' Party, German Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or DAP, was a political party founded in Munich in 1919, and you can see Adolf Hitler in the picture. Germany entered an economic depression in 1929. The Nazis exploited the situation and criticized the government in power. Eventually, in January 1933, Hitler became the German Chancellor. Through his strict dictatorship, all other political parties in the country were banned, and Nazis took control of every aspect of life in Germany. This gave Hitler and his party the opportunity to systematically pursue their ideologies of persecution and eradication from German society of Jews and other minorities, as well as expanding Germany's territory and halting the spread of communism. This agenda was a significant contribution to the start of World War II on the 1st of September, 1939. And in the top picture, you could see Adolf Hitler becoming Chancellor. And in the bottom, you can see the burnings of synagogues. Kristallnacht, the violent night of broken glass. This was Jewish women in Linz, Austria, are exhibited in public with a cardboard sign being excluded from the national community during the anti-Jewish pogrom known as Kristallnacht, November 1938. Germans passed by the smashed windows of a Jewish-owned shop. The aftermath of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. The German anti-Semitic pogrom, when over 200 synagogues were destroyed and thousands of Jewish homes and businesses were ransacked. On the night of November 9th, 1938, into the next day, anti-Jewish rioters burned or destroyed 267 synagogues and vandalized or looted 7,500 Jewish businesses. Here's a book burning. Furniture and ritual objects from the synagogue publicly burned in Mosbach on the town square on November 10th, 1938. The synagogue, which is bearing a sign reading, "Germans do not buy from Jews," was burned in the Kristallnacht attacks. Here it is, burned. In this November 1938 file photo, the firefighters, as you can see at the bottom, walk next to the Fasenenstrasse Synagogue, Berlin's biggest house of Jewish worship, after Nazis set fire to it in a series of anti-Jewish attacks throughout Germany and Austria on November 9, 1938, called Kristallnacht. So the firefighters did nothing. A group of people stand outside the Jewish-owned shop in an unarmed German town in November 1938 after Kristallnacht. In Italy, another World War I veteran, Benito Mussolini, after being discharged from the army in 1917, established the National Fascist Party. In collaboration with Italian socialists and nationalists, in October 1922, Mussolini and his Fascist Party marched on Rome. King Victor Emmanuel III asked him to form a new government and appointed him as the prime minister. Initially, he collaborated with the parliament, but eventually he effectively became a dictator. In January 1925, Italy was declared a fascist with Mussolini as the leader. In 1935, Mussolini's army invaded and annexed Ethiopia. And here, dear friends, you can see an emblem of the National Fascist Party. And in the bottom, you see Benito Mussolini's Roman salute. On the 17th of July, 1936, Mussolini joined Adolf Hitler in support of Francisco Franco's nationalist force in the Spanish Civil War against a left-wing Republican faction backed by the Soviet Union and international communist parties. Franco's national forces defeated the Republican forces in April 1939. Consequently, Franco became the head of state of Spain, forming an authoritarian dictatorship. So another dictatorship. In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin came to power after the death of Lenin. In the mid-1920s, he was committed to Marxist Leninism and established a totalitarian regime based on this ideology. In 1934, he started purging the leaders inside and outside the Communist Party, whose loyalty he doubted. This period is known as the Great Purge in the Soviet Union, as many people were arbitrarily arrested, sent to labor camps, or executed. And here's some pictures of Stalin's Great Purge. Over 1 million detained and more than 500,000 killed. And in the bottom picture, this is a historical picture. This is a mass grave showing some victims of the Great Purge. Another dictatorship was established in Brazil by Getúlio Dornel Vargas in 1937. Vargas served as the president of Brazil for 2 terms from 1930 to 1937. According to the constitution, he had to step down as a president after 2 terms. Using fears of a communist revolution as an excuse, he announced on the radio on 10th of November 1937 that he was seizing emergency powers. He dissolved the Congress and cancelled the election planned for 1938. He also changed the constitution to secure absolute power in the authoritarian new state corporatist regime. He stayed in power until 1945. And there's a picture of Getúlio Dornel Vargas in the top, and this is a picture of him on the radio when he was seizing power to become a totalitarian regime. A review of world history during the 1930s reveals many revolts, uprisings, and wars in different parts of the globe, including South America, Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Far East, leading eventually to World War II. The League of Nations was formed after World War I to prevent another war. but lost its credibility after some countries such as Germany, the Kingdom of Italy, and the Empire of Japan pulled out of it. In the top picture, you can see that is the logo of the League of Nations, and in the bottom, that is actually a picture of the League of Nations itself, holding together. Japanese invasion of Manchuria. In China, civil war for the control of the nation broke out in 1927 between the ruling Kuomintang and the rebel Communist Party of China. In the early 1930s, the communists announced a Chinese Soviet Republic. However, the republic did not last long and collapsed following Kuomintang attacks, resulting in a mass retreat by the communists, led by Mao Zedong, known as the Long March. In 1931, the Empire of Japan invaded and captured Manchuria. It established a puppet state of Manchukuo to control that region, managed by a puppet government headed by Hu Yi, the last Qing dynasty emperor of China. And here you see in the top the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. The Long March began at 5 p.m. on October 16, 1934. Secrecy and rear-guarded actions confused the nationalists, and it was several weeks before they realized that the main body of the Red Army had fled. The retreating force initially consisted of 86,000 troops, 15,000 personnel, and 35 women. The communist marchers crossed 24 rivers and 18 mountain ranges, mostly snow-capped. Only 4,000 troops completed the journey. 82,000 people died. The 1930s also witnessed the growth of fanaticism and fundamentalism, manifesting as extreme political, racial, religious, and nationalistic biases and prejudices. The long period of economic hardship and anxiety known as the Great Depression led to fanaticism and the emergence of radical regimes. The Great Depression in the United States affected every group of the society, but African Americans suffered the most. By 1932, nearly half of the African Americans had lost their jobs to whites. Racial violence also became more widespread, particularly in the southern states. In Germany, as described earlier, anti-Semitism became a major policy for the Nazis after 1933 and resulted in the extermination of millions of Jews in Europe. Here's a picture of Auschwitz. This is where millions of Jews were exterminated in the Holocaust. And in a bottom picture, you can see this is pictures of a mass pile of bodies that they didn't even get to burning. They just put them in a mass pile. This is when the Allies came into Auschwitz. They didn't even get to burn them. So they just had a big pile of bodies. Spread of communism. With the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Bolshevik Party came to power and fully embraced Marxist ideologies. This resulted in the spread of communism in Europe during the 20th century and the establishment of communist governments in Eastern and Central Europe after World War II. The spread of communism was so extensive that by 1985, 1/3 of the world lived under a communist system of governance. This significantly contributed to the spread of materialist theories and undermined religious beliefs. And in the top picture, you see some members of the Bolshevik Party. Communist anti-religious campaigns. In some communist countries, there were systematic and aggressive campaigns against religion. For example, in the Soviet Union, a new phase of anti-religious persecution started in 1928, after legislation was introduced to severely restrict religious activities in order to promote atheism. The main target, with the largest number of followers, was the Russian Orthodox Church, though other religious groups, such as and including the Baha'i community in Ashgabat, were also affected. The campaign continued until 1941. And in the top picture, it says, "Religion slows the 5-year plan. Down with the religious holidays." In paragraph 11, dear friends, the beloved guardian Shoba Effendi indicates that the crisis faced by the Baha'i community at that juncture of history was foreseen by His Holiness Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha asserts that the evident greatness of the Baha'i cause has provoked the attacks on the Baha'i community, not only by religious leaders, but also by proponents of current material, cultural, or political views. The greatness of the cause can be perceived in a number of contexts. The forces released through the revelation of His Holiness Baha'u'llah were already in operation to prepare the world for the establishment of His world order. Dear friends, in one of his tablets, His Holiness Abdul Baha states, this is in Baha'i World Faith, pages 393 to 394. Abdul Baha states, "O my friend, verily the cause is great, and the penetration of the word of God in the temple of all the regions is similar to the pervasion of the soul in a sound body. By the life of Baha, verily the power of the kingdom of God hath taken hold of the pillars of the world, and hath possessed all the nations. Thou wilt surely find the standards of the Testament waving in all the regions, the chanting of the verses of unity raised in exalted assemblies, and the lights of the Sun of Truth and its heat dispersing the thick clouds massed on the horizon." The teachings of the Baha'i faith also represent lofty standards set for human thoughts, attitudes, and deeds, which are on the extreme contrast to the vices and iniquities that underlined the ongoing oppression experienced by people during the 1930s. His Holiness Abdul Baha illustrates such contrasts when he urges us to endeavor with heart and soul. Abdu'l-Baha states, until the world of war become the world of peace, the world of darkness, the world of light, satanic conduct be turned into heavenly behavior, the ruined places become built up, the sword be turned into the olive branch, the flash of hatred become the flame of the love of God, and the noise of the gun, the voice of the kingdom, the soldiers of death, the soldiers of life, all the nations of the world, one nation, all races as one race, and all national anthems harmonized into one melody. And dear friends, that is it for part 4. Thank you, dear friends. Looking forward to present part 5.